Think about the last time you felt, truly ripped off or just totally let down by the world around you.
Right, yeah. We've all been there.
Exactly. Maybe a mechanic charged you for some repair you didn't actually need,
Mm-hmm.
or you read a headline about a corporation knowingly dumping chemicals into a local river.
Yeah, and when things like that happen, you probably look outward for someone or something to blame.
You do. You blame corporate greed, you blame like a lack of government regulation or the economy or capitalism or just a broken system.
Because it brings this weird sort of comfort, right? To point at a massive faceless machine and say, there it is. That structural flaw is why things are so bad.
Which is how, almost all modern sociological or political analysis works.
Exactly. We look for the external lever we can pull. We assume that if we just write a better law or elect a different official or adjust the interest rates, we can somehow fix the misery we see out in the world.
But the text we are diving into today argues that you are looking in entirely the wrong direction.
Totally the wrong direction.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a really close look at a single, just incredibly potent piece of philosophical writing from August 2022.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
It's by a writer named Xu Feng, edited by Qin Yu, and the title just throws down the gauntlet immediately. It's called See How Important It Is to Perfect One's Soul Garden.
And it is a completely uncompromising inside-out worldview. I mean, Xu Feng's core premise strips away every systemic excuse we have.
Literally all of them.
Right, the state of our world, the daily corruption, all these global crises. None of it is fundamentally about economics or technology or supply chains.
No.
According to this text, the root cause of every single problem you experience boils down to the inner state of the individual, what the author calls the soul garden.
Yeah, the soul garden. And before we really get into the weeds of this garden metaphor, I want to make our mission here very clear to you listening.
Good idea. Let's set some ground rules.
Because this text touches on some really intense, sweeping themes. It makes massive claims about political power, it dissects societal corruption, and it leans heavily on religious concepts, too.
Right, specifically mentioning things like Buddhas and demons to categorize human behavior.
Exactly. So our goal today isn't to endorse this worldview, nor are we here to condemn it. We aren't taking any political or religious sides at all.
No, not at all. We are simply unpacking this framework, putting on the author's highly specific glasses for a few minutes, and trying to understand the mechanics of the ideas presented in the original source material.
Right. Which requires us to, temporarily inhabit the logic of the text.
And the logic here demands that we stop looking at society as a machine made of laws and start looking at it as an ecosystem made of individual moral landscapes.
So let's start with how the author defines that landscape, because he uses two distinct metaphors that initially seem to clash, but they actually create a really profound image when you put them together.
Yeah, the garden and the architecture.
Right. He talks about the soul garden, but he immediately pairs that with an architectural metaphor. He opens by stating that the height of a building is directly related to its foundation.
Which makes intuitive sense. If you want to build a skyscraper, that foundation has to be solid.
But if your foundation is quicksand, Xu Feng writes, not to mention a skyscraper, even a small cottage is going to collapse at any time.
And we really have to reconcile those two ideas, the garden and the foundation.
What do you mean?
Well, a foundation is structural, right? It's static. You pour concrete, it sets, and you're done. But a garden is organic.
Right. It requires constant active cultivation.
Exactly. It requires weeding, pruning, watering. By combining them, the author is implying something very specific about human morality.
That goodness isn't just a given.
Right. Goodness isn't something you just inherently possess and can forget about, like a concrete slab. If you stop actively tending to your inner garden, the root system dies, the soil loosens, and your moral foundation literally turns into quicksand.
Wow. Which means the moment you stop doing the internal work, anything you try to build in the external world is doomed to collapse.
It has to. The structure can't hold.
It's like trying to run the latest, most advanced operating system on a computer with a completely fried motherboard.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like, it doesn't matter how elegant the software code is.
Right.
You could have the best laws, the best economic policies, the most advanced technology in the world. But the hardware, the soul garden of the people running the system, dictates what is actually possible.
Yeah, if the hardware is corrupted, the system crashes.
Exactly.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. And Xu Feng lays out the stakes for this internal hardware in absolute binary terms.
Yeah, there is no murky gray area in his spiritual framework whatsoever.
None. The text states that perfecting your soul garden leads to becoming a celestial being or a Buddha.
And the alternative.
Yeah.
Like if you let the weeds take over and the foundation turns to quicksand.
An ugly soul garden leads to becoming a ghost or a demon.
Celestial beings versus demons. It's
Yeah.
an incredibly stark dichotomy.
It really is.
But it makes sense why the author establishes this absolute baseline before he ever mentions the word society or talks about the real world.
Right. He is establishing personal cultivation as the ultimate prerequisite for existence.
You can't even begin to discuss a functioning community until you address the spiritual state of the individuals comprising it.
Which brings us to the most fascinating part of the text, I think. Because Shufeng doesn't just leave this as an abstract thought experiment about Buddhas and ghosts.
No, he gets very, very practical.
He actually maps out exactly what that structural collapse looks like when these quicksand individuals leave their houses and enter the workforce.
He traces how an internal spiritual failure manifests as tangible, everyday harm in society.
So let's walk through this supply chain of moral failure, because the author provides a relentless, highly specific laundry list of professions.
He really goes down the line. He starts with commerce and production. The text argues that if someone is a businessman with an imperfect soul garden, they will inevitably cheat and deceive for profit.
And notice the progression here. A businessman cheating for profit is a financial transgression. It hurts your wallet.
Right?
But the text immediately escalates. It says if a merchant has an ugly soul garden, they will produce toxic food, drinks, and medicines.
Man, think about what that actually means for a second. The text is literally saying the pesticides on the apple you buy or the substandard ingredients in your medication.
Yeah.
Well, those aren't failures of FDA regulations or supply chain oversight.
No, they are direct physical manifestations of someone's corrupted soul.
It's wild. The spiritual sickness inside the merchant becomes a literal physical toxin ingested by the consumer.
It's a total domino effect. And the text goes on to say that if an entrepreneur has an imperfect soul, they will produce substandard products and exploit their
It
workers.
just keeps branching out.
Yeah. If a farmer has a corrupted garden, they will produce toxic agricultural products. The author is looking at the very base layers of human survival.
The food we eat, the medicine we take.
Exactly, the goods we use. And he's linking their quality entirely to the moral purity of the producer. In this framework, there is absolutely zero separation between the spiritual and the professional.
This is where I have to push back a little bit and ask a really practical question.
Sure.
Because the text lays the blame entirely on the individual's soul garden. It's 100% personal accountability.
Mm.
But reading this, doesn't this view completely ignore the intense external pressures people face?
Walk me through your thinking there. How do you mean?
Well, take the farmer producing toxic agricultural products.
Okay.
The author frames this strictly as an internal moral failure, right? The farmer has an ugly soul, therefore he poisons the crops.
Right.
But what if that farmer uses toxic chemical pesticides simply because it's the only way to survive economically?
Mm.
Like what if the massive supermarket chains demand a certain yield at rock-bottom prices, and if the farmer doesn't use those chemicals, his farm forecloses and his family starves?
Yeah, that's a very real-world scenario.
Right. It just feels like Shufeng's philosophy ignores the reality of the systemic structures we are forced to operate within.
I get that. But that tension is the very crux of the author's argument. Shufeng refuses to let the system take the blame.
Why not, though? The system is huge.
Because from his perspective, the system itself isn't some abstract entity that exists independently of humanity. The system is just an aggregate of millions of individual soul gardens.
Oh. So the farmer can't blame the supermarket.
Precisely. Is who runs the supermarket. Another person with an imperfect soul garden who is prioritizing profit over human health
Okay, yeah.
and who creates the market demand. Consumers with uncultivated gardens. The text forces total radical accountability onto the spiritual state of the individual.
It doesn't allow for the excuse of, the system made me do it.
Exactly. If you participate in the corruption, if you exploit your workers to meet a quota or spray toxins to hit a margin, your garden is corrupted. You are choosing to build your cottage on quicksand.
Man, that is a heavy, almost terrifying level of responsibility.
It really is.
Even if the system is incredibly oppressive, giving in to that oppression and passing the harm down the line is still a reflection of your own inner dirt.
Right, because you made the choice.
Okay, that makes sense within the internal logic of the piece. But the text doesn't stop at farmers and merchants. It moves into professions that hold direct authority over our well-being and our freedom,
Yeah, it targets the professions we associate with care, protection, and justice.
which is where it gets really uncomfortable.
It does. The text claims that if a doctor has an imperfect soul garden, they will overtreat minor illnesses just to empty the patient's wallet.
Talk about a profound violation of trust.
Seriously.
I mean, when you go to a doctor, you are at your absolute most vulnerable. You don't know what's wrong with your own body, and you are entirely dependent on their expertise.
You have to trust them completely.
Right. And to exploit that specific vulnerability for financial gain is portrayed here not just as malpractice, but as a symptom of that demonic spiritual outcome we talked about earlier.
And it extends to law enforcement and civic duty, too. The text states that if a police officer has an imperfect soul garden, they will use their power to bully kind-hearted people.
Just flexing their authority for no reason.
Yeah. And if someone is a civil servant, they will fawn over their superiors while making life incredibly difficult for honest citizens.
It's the banality of everyday corruption. Kissing up to the boss while using red tape to punish the people you are actually supposed to be serving.
It paints a picture of a society where every single interaction, buying food, visiting a clinic, getting a permit, is fraught with danger.
Because you're constantly navigating other people's corrupted soul gardens. You're walking through a minefield of bad spiritual hardware.
Which leads us to an even bigger problem.
Oh, it gets big?
Way bigger. If everyday jobs are corrupted by ugly soul gardens, what happens when those same uncultivated souls acquire immense systemic power? This is where the text moves from the micro to the macro. We graduate from the everyday interactions that might ruin a single life or a single community to the national and global crises that can destroy millions of lives.
Yeah, the author pulls absolutely no punches when it comes to high-level authority. The text states explicitly that if an official has an imperfect soul, they will deceive their superiors, delude their subordinates, take bribes, and oppress the people.
It's a complete inversion of administrative duty.
Totally upside down.
Instead of serving the public becomes a resource to be extracted and managed through deception.
And it scales all the way to the top of the geopolitical ladder. Yuefeng writes that if a president has an imperfect soul garden, they will oppress dissenters and treat the people as if they were nothing, all just to consolidate their own power.
Consider the implications of that for a moment. I mean, we often hear the old adage that power corrupts.
Right, absolute power corrupts absolute.
But the mechanism in this text is different. Power doesn't corrupt a pure soul. No, rather, power acts as an amplifier for the garden that was already there. If you plant weeds in your garden, gaining power is like dumping high-grade fertilizer on them.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to think about it. It removes all the societal constraints that usually keep an ugly soul in check.
Exactly.
Like a corrupt merchant might only be able to poison a few hundred people with bad food because eventually the law or the market will step in and stop him. But a corrupt president, they have the power to silence the people pointing out the poison.
Which the text addresses directly. It says that people with power and an imperfect soul garden will do everything possible to invert right and wrong.
Invert right and wrong. That is a chilling phrase.
It really is.
It means they aren't just breaking the rules. They are actively rewriting reality to suit their needs. They are gaslighting an entire population.
And the author details exactly what that looks like on a national scale. These powerful individuals will create numerous wrongful convictions.
Of putting innocent people away.
Right. They will create an environment where people are afraid to speak the truth. The ultimate result is that they cause the public to live in fear and panic, completely stripped of any peace.
It's the macro manifestation of the demon outcome. A person with an ugly soul garden, given enough power, turns their entire society into a hellscape of anxiety and despair.
And the text actually uses those words. He says, people with an imperfect soul garden will constantly create troubles and sorrows, contradictions and conflicts, disappointment and despair.
This brings us to a massive paradigm shift in how we evaluate the world around us. Because how do we currently judge whether a country is successful or civilized?
Well, we look at the data, right?
Yeah. We measure gross domestic product. We look at their tech sector, their military strength, their infrastructure, their art, and their universities.
And Sweffing fundamentally throws all of those metrics in the trash.
Literally all of them.
The text states clearly whether a country is civilized depends entirely on whether the soul gardens of its citizens are perfect or not.
That completely flips how we measure global success.
It does.
A country could be a massive economic superpower, They could have gleaming cities, the most advanced AI, and a booming stock market.
The best of everything material.
Right. But if that society is full of corrupt officials taking bribes, merchants selling toxic products, and frightened citizens afraid to speak the truth, then by this definition, that country is completely barbaric.
It's uncivilized. The skyscrapers they built are just heavy glass and steel resting on quicksand, waiting for the inevitable collapse.
Yeah.
The text argues that to bring a country into the actual ranks of civilization, the very first thing, and really the only truly necessary thing, is to perfect and refine the soul gardens of its citizens.
Without that inner perfection, wealth and technology just make the barbarism more efficient.
Exactly. Efficient barbarism. Which leads to the author's boldest, most sweeping claim about the nature of human suffering.
This part is wild.
It really forces you to stop and rethink how you process the evening news. The text declares that the crisis of humanity is never brought about by nature. It is caused entirely by the imperfect souls of people.
Never brought about by nature. I mean, it forces us to re-examine every catastrophe.
Let's take a famine, for instance.
Yeah.
We typically view a famine as a natural disaster. A lack of rain, a failed harvest.
Right, an act of God or just bad weather.
But Watson's logic challenges that. Is the mass starvation really caused by the weather? Or is it caused by the greed of officials hoarding the emergency resources?
Oh, right.
Is it caused by politicians fighting territorial wars instead of building irrigation infrastructure? Is it caused by merchants price gouging the grain that is actually left?
The author is saying the root cause of the crisis is always human. The drought is just weather. The famine is a spiritual failure.
Exactly.
The ultimate cause of crisis is never the climate or the economy or the virus. We are the crisis. Our uncultivated inner state is the crisis.
Therefore, the text concludes, the greatest crisis of humanity is the crisis of the soul. Every other problem you see is just a downstream symptom of that singular internal failure.
As we wrap up this deep dive, the ultimate stakes laid out by Xue Feng are incredibly sobering, and they operate on two distinct levels.
Yeah, the individual and the societal.
Right. On the individual level, the text leaves you with a stark warning. If a person does not cultivate their own soul garden, if they let the weeds grow and the foundation turn to quicksand, they should never expect to live a happy life.
Let alone dream of reaching heaven, or what the text refers to as the other shore.
There is simply no shortcut to spiritual fulfillment. You have to get your hands dirty and do the internal gardening.
And on the macro level, the societal warning is just as dire. If a nation ignores this spiritual construction and focuses only on material wealth or systemic expansion, it will inevitably descend into ignorance.
It will just collapse under its own weight.
It will inevitably be ruled by tyranny, leaving everyone in a state of misery. You cannot legislate your way out of a spiritual deficit.
Which brings this entire philosophy right back to your doorstep, to you listening right now. From the exorbitant bill your doctor hands you, to the hidden ingredients in the food on your table, to the honesty of the police officer patrolling your street, all the way up to the daily decisions made by your highest government officials. This text argues it all stems from one single, inescapable source.
The state of our collective inner gardens.
It is an incredibly demanding philosophy because it steals away our favorite coping mechanism. It leaves absolutely no room for us to point the finger at a faceless system.
It demands radical, total personal responsibility as the only true engine for any meaningful societal change.
So as you go about the rest of your day today, as you interact with the merchants, the civil servants, the algorithms, and the systems of power around you, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Something to really sit with.
If all of our societal structures and all of our daily interactions are truly just mirrors reflecting our collective soul gardens back at us, take a long, close look at the environment you are standing in right now, the news you read, the community you live in, the interactions you just had. What kind of garden is it reflecting back at you?